Hello Octoprint fans, former lurker here. Today we're going to show you how to set up a DSLR, an external webcam, using Octoprint. Octolapse supports scripting cameras like DSLRs, and there are various ways to add different camera scripts to allow you to acquire images from almost any camera. So today we're going to focus on a DSLR. I'm using a Nikon D5200, so the steps may be slightly different for your camera. All cameras are different. G-Photo 2 is a great program, and that's what we're going to be using to capture the images, and I'm going to walk you through that all right now. So first, let's look at the Octolapse Wiki page. So if you navigate to my GitHub repository, you can find that by searching for Octolapse and GitHub. It should be the first link. If not, I've got a link to that below. Once you land on the GitHub page, you can click on the wiki. And then scroll down to a section called Guides, and you will find Configuring a DSLR. This is the guide we're going to be following today. So click on that link, and you'll see right now, this is targeting version 0.4. So if you're using a previous version, like version 0.3.4, you're going to want to follow the Getting Started guide on how to install Octolapse version 0.4. Once you're done with that, come back to this page. Again, it's in Guides and Configuring a DSLR. Now, I've got some caveats here, like when should you use a DSLR? First off, I do not recommend that you use a DSLR until you've used Octolapse with a webcam. Now, obviously, if you don't have a webcam, you may have to skip this part, but it'll save you a lot of grief, and it'll make things a little bit easier if you're familiar with Octolapse and how it works before you try something. And this DSLR guide is a little bit more complicated than using just a webcam. It requires a couple different skills. So again, I recommend getting it all set up before attempting this advanced option. Okay, so this guide is going to cover installation, assuming that you're using Octopi. It should work for any Linux flavor. If you're using Windows, I hope to create a guide for that later. But again, this is going to be focusing on Octopi. Now, the first thing that you're going to need to do is update your Raspberry Pi. So I've got a guide on how to do this. Well, it's not my guide. It's actually the official raspberrypi.org guide to upgrading your OS. And if you scroll down a little bit, first thing you need to do is connect to a terminal window. I've actually got a guide that shows you how to connect via PuTTY, but we're not going to follow that right now. So let's switch to our terminal. I'm going to assume that you've already connected via SSH, and the first thing you want to do is get any updates. So you can do a sudo that runs the command as an administrator, apt update, and it's going to ask you to enter in your password. So if you copy your password in the clipboard and you click in the PuTTY window and use a single right click, that'll paste in your password. Now, for security reasons, it's not going to show you your password, but it's pasted in there. I hit enter, and it's going to check all the packages to see, to make sure that everything's up to date. It may take quite a bit of time. I've actually already run this update on my version, so hopefully it's not going to find too much. And you can see it's progressing pretty quickly, but I can tell you, depending on what package you're using, this could take a little bit of time. So you may want to go grab a snack, get a drink, wait for this to finish. I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording, and then we'll come right back as soon as this is finished. Okay, now our upgrade's finished. Now the next thing we want to do is do a full upgrade. And to do that, we're going to type in sudo apt full-upgrade. Now again, it's going to look for upgrades. It's going to upgrade all my packages. It's going to tell me that a little bit of space is going to be used. I'm going to answer yes. Now it's going to start downloading and installing. And once again, I'm going to pause the video until this is finished. All right, we're back. So everything is installed. Now the next step that you want to do is to reboot, and you can do that by typing sudo reboot. I'm not going to do that right now because I've already actually got a pretty recent version installed, and I think things are going to work. Okay, so let's go back to the wiki. And the next thing that's Listed here under step 2 is installing the latest version of Octolapse and Octoprint. If you're not using Octoprint version 1.4.0, you may want to update to that right now. And you can do that by switching to the Octoprint webpage and clicking on the settings wrench or spanner and scrolling down to the software update and look up here and make sure you have at least Octoprint 1.4.0. If you don't, check for updates and an install link will pop up. Then you can update. And as far as Octolapse goes, you can follow the Getting Started guide. Let me show you that. Scroll up here in the links, there's a Getting Started guide. That has a section that shows you how to install the latest version of Octolapse and how to set it up and get it running. So once you're done with that, then we're on to installing Gphoto 2. Now Gphoto 2 is a library that we're going to use to capture images from our DSLRs. It's a great library. I recommend you check out the homepage. There's a link right here. There's a link here to show you the compatible cameras. Not all cameras support every feature, but in this guide, I'm using kind of the low-hanging fruit, the functionality that your camera is likely to support. So hopefully everything works out well. Now next, so let's go to the terminal window, and we are going to want to install Gphoto 2. Now there's a couple different ways of doing this, and if you switch back to the wiki, there's a guide here that I have for installing Gphoto 2. And one way to do it is with an install script that I have linked to. I recommend this method because this script, you can use it to install the most recent version of Gphoto 2. It might not be available in the alternative, installing with the apt command. And you can also install the development versions. So sometimes for newer cameras, they're added to the development versions, but they're not added to the stable release, and that's because they're new and they need to be tested. But a lot of people are using some newer cameras, mirrorless cameras, and latest models, and you're more likely to be able to get those if you're installing with this script. So I've got the script here that you need to install. And first we need to create the file that we're going to use to install the script. So first you want to navigate to the scripts folder. So if you copy that command out, switch to your terminal. Let me clear this. If you right click, if you're using PuTTY, that'll paste in there. It'll change the scripts folder. Now if you change back to the wiki, we're going to want to create a script to install Gphoto 2. So I'm going to copy that out, go back into the terminal, right click to paste. What this is going to do, it's going to open the Nano editor. Now it may ask you to enter your password here, so if it does, go ahead and do that. And then you should see the Nano editor. It should open up with an empty file. If you switch back to the wiki and just copy everything and make sure you get this very first line, that's important. Just kind of scroll down to the bottom. It's really long, but it does a lot of heavy lifting, so it's a big script. So make sure you copy everything out of here all the way to the last line, and including, as I showed you before, the very first line. Control C. Now I'm going to switch to my terminal. I'm going to right click to paste all that text inside of Nano. There we go. Now we want to save it, and you can do that by holding Control down and pressing O. And it asks, what the file name is, and we entered it earlier, so I'm just going to hit Enter to confirm. Now that it's saved, I hit Control X to exit. Now that script is created, and the next thing we need to do is to give that script permission to execute. So if you go back into the wiki, the command here, chmod, will give executable permissions to that script. So I'm going to right click, copy that out, switch back to the terminal, right click into paste, hit enter. Now we've added execute permissions. So this script is ready to go. So all we need to do is run it. So if you go back into the wiki, there's a command right here to install this, and this requires you to run it as sudo, so as the administrative user. So I'm going to select that, copy, switch back into my terminal, paste it in there. If it asks for your password after you hit enter, make sure that you enter that. I'm going to hit enter. Now it's going to ask me for my password, so I'm going to copy that out, paste it in with a right click, and and hit enter. Now it asks me if I want to install the latest development version or the latest stable release. You may need the development version, it depends on your camera, but it's a good idea to start out using the stable release. If you have problems, you can rerun this command right here and you can reinstall the development version. This script uninstalls any previous versions, so you can always install one and then install the other if you need it later. So we'll hit 2, hit enter. Now it says it's updating sources, and I'm going to go ahead and pause it while Gphoto 2 updates. Oh. Alright, so the install is now completed. And let's go back to the wiki page. Alright, now there's an alternative installation method here if you don't want to go through that script. I don't recommend following it, but this is the alternative method of installing it. If you want to try that, go ahead. Okay, so the next step is to configure our PseudoErrs file, and this is going to let Gphoto 2 run without a password. So you're going to basically add it to a list of commands that are allowed to run without entering a password. So in order to start that, we want to run the sudo by sudo command. So I'm going to copy that out, switch back to our terminal, right click to paste it in, hit enter, and it should open up the PseudoErrs file. And if you hit page down, go down to the bottom, and then switch back to the wiki, there's a line here, 2 lines actually, you should copy out and make sure you get that first pound symbol. Hit Control-C to copy. And again, this is going to give access to all users with no password. It's going to give them root access to this particular executable file. Now, this particular path may not be your path to Gphoto 2. So down here I've got some instructions on how to find out where Gphoto 2 is installed. So let's run that real quick. Let me switch back to the terminal, and I'm going to hit Control-X to exit here. I can paste in this where is Gphoto 2, and it's going to tell me where it's installed. So you want to copy that out, just highlight it, Control-C. And then let's reopen vsudo. All right, now at the very bottom, let's go down here again. That's where I was just a minute ago. I'm going to copy out these 2 lines. Let's switch to the wiki. Right here. Copy those out. Paste them in the terminal window. And remember, the address that I found earlier was different. It was actually pointing to this location. Let me back in, right click. This is where Gphoto 2 is installed on my machine. So now I'm going to save this, Control-O to output, enter, and then Control-X to exit. And again, I'm going to run that where is, just so you can once again see that my install is in a different location. And it's kind of funny because I installed this about a week ago, and it was installed in the other location mentioned in the wiki right here. So I'm not really sure why that happens, but it does, and that's why I've added these instructions. It is possible to run the scripts that control your DSLR without sudo, but it requires you to paste your password in. I've got instructions for how to do this here, but I don't really recommend it. The next step is to reboot. So let's switch back to the terminal. Let's do, whoops. I didn't copy the reboot out. I must hit the wrong link. So there it's copied. Right click in, sudo reboot. I'll hit enter, and it's closed my putty window, and I'm going to pause this video until the Octopi is completely rebooted. Okay, so the Octopi is completely rebooted. So let's reopen a terminal window. I'm opening putty again. I'm going to click my session. Now the window pops up, and I'm going to log in as Pi, paste my password in. Great. Okay, now let's switch back to the wiki. Okay, so we have completed the Gphoto 2 guide except for testing the camera. So I've got a line here. Oh, actually it's not in this guide. Here, I guess first you have to go back to the DSLR guide. So scroll up, find guides in the right menu and click configuring a DSLR. Then we want to scroll back down to test your camera. Here we go. So this is the command we're going to use to see if Gphoto 2 can actually detect your camera. So I'm going to copy that out, go into the terminal, paste it in, and it should see your camera and report what the model is. If you have trouble here, I recommend you go to the official Gphoto 2 site, and that's linked in the wiki, right here. And there's, make sure that your camera is in the list of compatible cameras. You may want to do a little Google foo if you get an error here, or if you see something like this without your camera model, and see if someone else has had your problem. I do not maintain Gphoto 2. I am not a developer in that. I'm not an expert in DSLRs, unfortunately. So there's probably better references out there for figuring out how to get your camera to work than here. All right. So if your camera is detected, then you want to run this test to try to capture an image. So let's copy this command out. Whoops. Copy. Let's switch back to the terminal. I'm going to right click to paste it in. And you should hear your camera snap. I just heard mine snap. So that's good. It apparently is still running. Oh, there we go. Not sure why that took quite that long, but again, DSLRs are a little bit finicky. Sometimes they don't behave 100%, but we did get the image captured. It didn't report an error. It said it created a new file. That's great. Now we're going to test another command. So let's go back to the wiki. Copy this command. This is going to not only capture an image, but it's going to try to download it. That's important because that's the way this script or this method is intended to work. So copy that, switch back to the terminal, right click to paste it in, and it's snapping. Again, it's a little slow today, not 100% sure why that is. There we got our file, it downloaded, it's saving it, and if we type ls, that'll list the directory contents, and we see this image right here. So it did download the image that it said it was going to download, and there it is. So let's switch back to the wiki. Looks like our capture image command worked. Now we have to create a script that's actually going to acquire these images from our DSLR. So first, let's change to the scripts folder. So just copy this out, switch back to your terminal, paste it in with a right click, and then you'll see that you are in the scripts folder. And now we are going to open the text editor Nano, and we're going to create this new file called takesnapshots.sh. So just copy that out, switch to terminal, paste it in, and that once you hit enter, it should open the Nano editor. And if I switch to the wiki again, it's actually got the script here. Now you'll notice this important note. Make sure you copy this first line, including that pound symbol. It's very important. So select everything. Make sure you get this entire FI, it's the closing for the if. Make sure you hit that. Hit Control C, go back in your terminal, and just right click to paste that in. Now to save this file, you hit Control O, and it asks you what the file name should be, and this one is correct. Hit enter, and then Control X to exit. Alright, now we've got a script created called takesnapshots.sh. You'll see that right here. And now we're going to want to give it permissions to execute. So if you switch back to the wiki and scroll down, you can copy out this chmod command that gives execute permissions to the takesnapshot script. So I'm going to copy that out, switch back to the terminal, paste it in, and now that script is executable. Now we can run a test of this command, and I have formatted one. If you go back into the wiki, you can copy this line, and what this is going to do, it's going to call this script with a couple of parameters, and normally Octolapse is going to send these parameters to this script, but we're going to do it manually here just to make sure it works. And it's telling it to put the picture that it takes from the camera, to download it and put it in this folder. So scripts, and it's going to be called test.jpg. So when you copy this, make sure you hit that last quote. Sometimes that can be a problem. Control-C to copy. Switch back to your terminal and paste that in there. Now when you hit enter, you should hear your camera snap. There it went. And it's going to download that photo to the scripts folder, and it's going to save it as this file name. So ls, we see test.jpg, and that's exactly what we told it up here, how to save it. Now you may notice that it downloaded a different file name, but this script actually has a function to rename this file. So we renamed it to this test.jpg, and that's exactly what we want to see. So let's go back to the wiki, and let's look at the next step, which is configuring Octolapse. So we're going to want to switch to Octoprint. Here we go, and navigate to the Octolapse tab. And then down here, make sure current run configuration is expanded. And then click this link here, cameras. That'll open all the camera profiles. And what we're going to want to do is add a profile. And I'm going to call it Nikon D5200. You can call it whatever you want, but this is the kind of webcam I have, and that makes it easy for me to identify. And then you're going to want to go down to this camera type and pick external camera script, because this camera is a script camera. It's going to be run by calling that that bash script. So right here, this setting, enable camera setup, this field is the script that we want to execute. So if we go back to the wiki, we followed some of those steps. We'll see the snapshot acquire script for the script that we created is this, and this is just the full path to the script. So home pi scripts take snapshot.sh. Copy that out, go back to Octoprint, and paste that in this snapshot acquire script. Now this test button, if you click it, it's going to execute this script with similar parameters to when we tested the script earlier manually through the terminal. So I'm going to hit test. Oh, and one other thing, there's a timeout for this script, and it is controlled by this timeout right here, this snapshot timeout. So let's increase this a lot here. Let's add another 2 zeros to it. We don't want anything timing out while we're testing. So let's go ahead and click test. You'll see it's testing it. It'll tell you the timeout, 500 seconds. I heard my camera click, and now it comes back with success. And this green success box that you saw pop up, that means that not only did the script complete, but there was a file at the proper location with the right name when it completed. In some of the later DSLR tutorials, that actually will be orange. If you see an orange or a red box, there's a problem. Go to the troubleshooting guide. That is right up here, this link to troubleshooting, and look for the camera. I'm going to have a section in there on DSLRs. As of today, it isn't actually populated very well, but I'm going to add tips and troubleshooting details and steps as I discover them. So make sure you take a look at that. All right, so let's switch back to Octoprint here. Now that I've clicked it, I've got a green message. It means everything is set up and ready to go. So save your profile, close the settings, and now you'll see your new profile show up right here in the camera list. It shows up as disabled. If I switch to that profile here in the time-lapse preview, this is the latest snapshot taken by the camera that's selected. So last time I ran Octolapse, this was the last snapshot. That's what's going to show up here. Again, this is not a camera stream. That gets confusing sometimes for users. But switch to your DSLR, you'll see this message that no snapshots have been taken. This will go away after you run a print and after the first snapshot's taken. So eventually that'll actually show the snapshot that was taken with Octolapse. Now the next step here I recommend is to enable test mode, because we're going to want to test this camera. So I'm going to go ahead, enable that. You'll see a little message saying test mode is going to be activated the next time our print starts. And what test mode does, it prevents your printer from warming up. It stops the extruder in the bed from warming up. It prevents extrusion commands, so your filament should not extrude. It prevents your fans from turning on, and a few other things that make it much faster to test your Octolapse settings. Now, I definitely recommend unloading your filament before doing this, because it's possible that there's a bug in test mode. I don't know of any. It's been running stably for over a year and a half, but just in case, better not to run cold filament into your extruder. Okay, so now the test mode is enabled. You need to select a file, like a good test file. I'm using a little calibration cube. It's a nice small file. It doesn't take very long to print. Go ahead and select that. And now I am going to start a print. So let's go ahead and click print. All right, now this is a snapshot preview. The getting started guide explains all this. So go ahead and refer to that if you're not sure what this snapshot plan preview is. Go ahead and accept. And then you'll see my XY axis homing here. This is going to take just a little bit of a second. Let me go ahead and switch to the Octolapse tab while it does its leveling and point you to the snapshot plan down here. If you're using one of the smart triggers, you'll see this snapshot plan. If the snapshot plan panel is enabled, you can enable it and disable it there. And it shows you when the snapshots are going to be taken, and it lets you animate a little kind of an animation of how your how your time lapse is going to go. So it's just about ready to take a snapshot. Let's go up here to this time lapse preview, and what you'll see, it's about to acquire an image. Now I heard my camera snap, and it's downloading the image, and there it is. And you can actually click this button here to see a full-size preview of it. So you can use this to see if your camera's in focus, to see if your settings are correct. I recommend you use manual camera settings when you're taking DSLR time lapses. So manual focus, manual exposure, manual light balance. That'll give you a really even time lapse, and you won't have as much flicker. It's also a good idea to close your blinds. You don't want the sunlight levels changing when a cloud goes overhead and that mess up your time lapse. It's a good idea to cover up any other lighting, like LEDs on your printer, or anything that might introduce different lighting levels into your camera. That'll give you the best image quality. Obviously, you want to get your focus correct, so make sure that's all set up. Now, I recommend running a couple layers, and you'll notice I have 3 cameras enabled. So it's actually 2 snapshots per camera. So right now it's got 4 layers. So I can actually cancel this, and we'll see what happens. So it's about to take a snapshot. I'll wait for that to finish. And then we're going to cancel it. Great. So now I've canceled the time lapse, and it's got enough images to render. So you can see it's rendering all the cameras, and you can see here, unfortunately, our DSLR is going to be the last thing that renders, but this order isn't guaranteed. It basically is kind of a random order. So once that is finished rendering, this button will go away that says that there's rendering progress, and then you'll be able to click on videos and images, and you can find your video in here, and you can download it by clicking this button, and you can check it out. Now, if you don't like the video that you see, if you don't think the image is in focus, or you think your colors are wrong, I recommend adjusting your camera. Make sure test mode is enabled, rerun your test print, take a couple snapshots, cancel it, see what your video looks like, and keep doing that until you're happy with what you see. And then you can turn test mode off, just like that. And the next time you start a print, you will get a live print and hopefully a great DSLR time lapse. Go ahead and post those on YouTube. Send me a link. Put it on Reddit. I monitor all that kind of stuff. I'd love to see your videos. And I would also appreciate it if you check the bottom of the Octolapse tab. There's a couple good links here. One is a link to the About page. It shows a lot of the patrons, excuse me, who've contributed to Octolapse development. Several developers who've helped a little bit with the code. Obviously Gina, the creator of Octoprint. Just read about that. I may update this and add more interesting information, but it's good to know where things come from and who's supporting your software. And there's also a link to the GitHub repository. Click on that. You can see everything that I'm doing, different plugins, the Arc Welder plugin, that's brand new. It's unreleased. And there's also a link to my YouTube channel where you hopefully found this video. A link to my PayPal if you want to send me coffee or beer money or become a patron. This link to Patreon You can become an Octolapse sponsor. I appreciate all my sponsors. Thanks, guys. All right, so hopefully now you've got a DSLR working. I've got 2 other guides on DSLR cameras, including the no download method, which is a lot faster because you don't have to wait for the camera images to download over the slower USB cable. They'll just go straight to your SD. And then another, the most advanced method, is the deferred download guide, where the images are all captured and saved on your camera, and then right before rendering, they're all downloaded all at once, so that you can still get a rendered video that are captured fast because they're not being downloaded once per frame. So check out those. I'm going to drop a link in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.